Big boy rankings. The work begins. The Fantasy MLR 2025 season is quickly approaching, and it's time to get ready. And we start off by talking about the big boys. Matt and myself rank our top five forwards heading into the 2025 Fantasy MLR season, ones that you need to keep an eye on, and a few sleepers here along the way. We also break down the latest news and notes from around the league, plus much more. The Fantasy Ruckers show starts right now.
Where rugby and the world of fantasy sports collide. Welcome to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, talking all things rugby from the MLR to leagues around the world. We're on top of it. Headphones on, pads off. This is the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Now, here are your hosts, Ryan Yee, Matt Yee, and Devin Vanderpool.
What's up, everybody? This is episode 137 of the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Thank you so much to our Fantasy Ruckers League members, our community members, and everyone else tagging along on this journey of making fantasy rugby a reality in the MLR. Pretty stoked for this episode, Maddie. We got the big boy rankings coming up here, like we said at the top of the show. It's fully here. We're less than a month away from the start of the Major League Rugby season. And that means the work begins now when it comes to prepping for the upcoming Fantasy MLR year. We've had our release of people signing up for the 2025 season. I mean, it's all good things right now here in the world of Fantasy MLR. What's up, Maddie?
Well, yeah. I mean, hey, we're looking forward to it. We're a month away. We still don't have an anthem roster, so things are looking good, except in Carolina. But you know where else things aren't looking very good, Ryan? We got a man down today.
We do have a man down, like with you every single week. Matt Yee, Ryan Yee, and usually Devin Vandy Vanderpool. We're just about to start the beginning of this recording of this podcast, and for some reason, Vandy's computer was absolutely drenched in what appeared to be apple juice.
Could have been water. Could have been bodily fluids.
But we have the video proof. He asks his son Louis, do you promise, Louis, you didn't do anything? He says he didn't. So
He promised.
He pinky promised. So I blame it on the water ghost or the apple juice ghost or whatever have you. But Vandy will not be able to participate on this episode of the Fantasy Rucker Show. Our very own in-house big boy is not here for our big boy show, but it's okay. We're gonna march on here. We're gonna do our best. Again, we are breaking down the top fantasy forwards heading into this 2025 season out of the players that are available to us at the time of the recording of this podcast. We go through the best front rowers, the best second rowers, the best back rowers, and give you our best overall forwards, including some honorable mentions. This is where the grind begins, Maddie. I texted you earlier today about just how excited I am for this episode, particularly because when you start to kind of play out these rankings, it really starts to feel like the fantasy season is inching closer and closer, and I'm getting pumped up.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to get to it, but yeah, we'll see some. I think this is going to be a good one, right?
I think it's gonna be, and I think we did some good research that, we know the history last year of our top five.
We'll get into that. We'll get into that, right?
All right. Well, if you aren't already, before we do get into all of this good stuff, give you the latest breakdown of all that's happening in the league, get into those rankings, give you an update to all that's going on in Fantasy MLR in our Supreme Commissioner Yee's League update, give us a follow at the Fantasy Ruckers. We say this every single episode. Help support the podcast, help support the YouTube channel. Like, subscribe, leave a comment down below. We love interacting with you guys. Been hovering around that 100 mark on our YouTube page. We'd love to get that up, especially as we inch closer to the Fantasy MLR 2025 season. It's been all good stuff. And again, this is the best time to be following along, especially on socials, because we have all the good content coming out as it pertains to Fantasy MLR, how to participate this season. You can still do that, by the way, which we'll get into a little bit more. And also content when it comes to these top five releases, waiver wire rankings, starts of the week, etc. That'll all be there at the Fantasy Ruckers, Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, even now. We got that stuff too.
I don't know what that
we're
is.
Legit. And if you aren't already either, if you want more Fantasy MLR content, you can join our Discord channel. Got a fun group of people over there. It's our main platform in which we communicate for our Fantasy MLR leagues. And then moving on to our official official fantasy platform. We use thefantasyruckers.com. Our
Mm.
website guru, Alistair Kirschpool, has been hard at work updating the website after what was a successful first year to the public, and it's going to look and have even better features heading into this season. It's going to be fun. All the stats are still up there from last year, so if you want to do any of the research heading into 2025, that is a good place to start. All right, Maddie, you ready to get into it? We'll start off with some of the latest happenings around the league.
Always, buddy, always.
News dump.
All right, it is the Fantasy Ruckers news dump. Time to break down the latest happenings in Major League Rugby from the past week since we last had our episode. Maddie, last week in our news dump episode, you kind of had a little bit of a rant there, a little bit of a
Yeah, and it
you
didn't
needed
do
to blow some
anything.
steam.
So does it really matter if I had
It
a
didn't.
rant? Because it did absolutely nothing. All I did was sign a dang president that hasn't even told the team, hey, let's release a roster maybe because we're less than a month. You know what they actually did to mock us, Ryan?
What?
You
What
know
did
what they
they
did
do?
to mock us?
What did
They
they do?
posted a post saying how close we are to the season.
They did.
Yeah,
They did.
and that's just reminding everybody, and I think Jam Delay commented on it, but just reminding us just how close we are and just how ridiculous it is that they have not released any players.
Yeah, it was a comment that was actually released by the league. And again, we are talking about Anthem Rugby Carolina. Junior Gaffa is excited
Oh, is he? Is he playing though?
for this
What's he
season.
doing? What's he excited for?
According to this post, he is. But yes, to Matthew's point, we have not yet have had an announcement from this Anthem Rugby Carolina team. Not only because I will give them, I shouldn't give them much credit, but I will
Don't give
say
them any credit. I don't care about their coaches.
they are not the only team that has not officially announced a roster, but they have not even released any
They haven't-
signings whatsoever or
Nothing.
confirmed any signings. At least every single other team except for the Anthem squad has released at least some things when it pertains
And
to
Seattle-
their upcoming roster.
Seattle was the other one lagging behind, but then they pick it up. They do
They
what
made up for
Seattle
it.
does, and they say, hey, we're going to release a full roster. Here
That
you
is
go.
right. That is right. So let's break it down step by step. We'll get it out of the way right off the top, Maddie. But Anthem
Who
did make
cares?
some announcements. We'll say it quickly here. Announcing the head coach for the 2025 season, Alama
Ryan, can you?
Ioremia. I think
Yeah,
I'm
can you
saying that
tell me
right.
3 things that you like about him?
Yes, I think off the checklist, Alama is actually a really, really good straight shooter.
Oh, wow.
He gives it to you straight. He
Mm,
shoots it straight.
Mm.
It's right down the middle.
That's good.
That's according to the Anthem Rugby Carolina post here about the head coach signing of Alama Ioremia. He also demands discipline and integrity,
Demands.
something that we're very big here on this show about integrity and being credible. That's something that
Lots of
Alama
discipline
is, so
on this
that's
show.
lots of discipline. So that's 2 check marks here. I think we'd be great players for Alama, and he also emphasizes rugby fundamentals. So you can throw that one out of the thing because I got no
Catch
fundamentals
pass?
at all. Catch pass, a little bit of
Catch
catch
pa-
pass,
Wow.
catch pass. So
Wow. What
jo-
about posting a roster?
jokes aside, head coach Alama Ioremia is a guy that has a lot of experience in the rugby world. He's going to be obviously the new head coach of Anthem Rugby Carolina, was the head coach of Auckland and the NPC Bunnings between 2018 and 2022, also coaching Samoa between 2015 and 2017. Also a long list of being an assistant coach for a handful of Super Rugby teams, including the Hurricanes and Wellington, and has a very storied playing career himself as well. Number 272 in Samoa International, and then All Blacks number 942 has 40 caps with them, 65 appearances with Wellington, 42 with the Hurricanes. So a guy that has a lot of experience that should hypothetically be able to draw the best out of hypothetical players that have
Yes.
yet to be named here upcoming
Yes.
this season. Quickly, before we move on, because I don't want to touch too much on Anthem until they release a roster, I do not want to give them any more of the spotlight until that happens. They did announce a president. Patrick
Awesome.
Stack is
Great. Maybe he
hopping on
can
board
post a roster.
for their first team president. All right, let's get on to the teams that are doing some stuff here, though. And I mean, kudos to the NOLA Gold, the Chicago Hounds, and you mentioned it just a bit ago there, Matt, the Seattle Seawolves, and all coming out and releasing full rosters. We were kind of harping on Seattle last week in our episode, as we were breaking down some of the highlights of every team's signings during the offseason, getting everyone caught up to speed. Seattle was a team that didn't have a lot of their, especially returning players, confirmed coming back, but they squashed that all by releasing their roster not too long ago. So NOLA, Seattle, Chicago, all doing that. Notables from that, obviously, we were speculating it. Mac Mason, we had a feeling would not return with the Seattle
Yep.
Seawolves. With the additions of Fuche and the acquisition of Rodney Iona going to the Seattle Seawolves,
Oh, it was a
and then
big one there.
that
Devin
was
Short back.
Devin Short
Devin
back,
Short's still there, which is
still
great
there,
to see.
which is great to
I
see.
hope we get to see him play a bit more this year.
And then kind of the only other one that really popped out to me was Nola Gold. There was obviously one of the first signings this offseason was Kayla McEnany after the exodus that we're calling it here on the Fantasy Ruckers show
Mass
when
exodus,
the
yes.
Utah Warriors kind of departed with a handful of their marquee guys.
Pushed
Kayla
him.
McEnany was announced to be signing with the Nola Gold. He did not appear on their official roster list. So not quite sure, don't have any insight into what's happening there.
They're going to be
But
fine.
at least at this point, we can say that you won't be relying on him this upcoming fantasy MLR season, possibly.
Until further notice, I think they'll be fine, though.
Yeah, we'll see, but we'll break it all down here as we get through these rankings. All right. We've covered, I guess, before we get into this Supreme Commissioner Yee's League update, a couple final notes here. There was a whole slew of signings that have happened over the course of the past week. Kind of notable ones that we can go through. Obviously, we mentioned it quickly last week, the addition or the returning of Frank Lahore coming back, which is great to see for the Utah Warriors. In addition to that, Joe Mano is coming back, which is a big one there. Obviously, with
Yep.
the departure of
Michael Manson.
Michael Manson and Kayla McEnany, a guy that's been a staple, was a fantasy MLR superstar a couple seasons ago, is returning with the Utah Warriors. So there is some firepower that is remaining there in that back three that has been so notable for Utah. We also have the signing of Tavita Taimalau is returning to the San Diego Legion as well, along with
See?
Tuver Vugakoto returning for the Utah Warriors. And then also Blake McKeary is signing with the Utah Warriors as well. So Utah doing a lot of work there. A 22-year-old Kiwi winger from the Bunnings NPC who played with Counties Rugby is also joining the Warriors down in Utah.
Very nice. I do have a couple news, Ryan, that I think you didn't hit.
Okay.
Well, one, I guess, we love growing our game. That's what we're here for. We love seeing the teams get a spotlight. San Diego did something great. I think, Ryan, I don't know if you heard about this, but them releasing a documentary called
I did
Quest
see
for the
that.
Shield on
Hmm.
Amazon Prime.
Still need to dabble in
To
it.
Yep, yep. Still need to dabble in it for sure. But looking at their 7-year journey as San Diego Legion, I guess their growth from their beginnings to now their successful kind of continuings. And then the big one for me, I mean, this is one of the biggest things that I think I've seen come out of the MLR is the fact that Fijian Drua out of
Hmm.
Super Rugby Pacific has an exhibition match against LARFC in Fiji that they are playing, I think, on like the 24th or something of January. But that is historic. I mean, it's the first time that they are clashing. Any Super Rugby side has clashed against an MLR side. I think it's going to be an awesome thing that's going on. I think this is great for LA for their development and their learnings. I think it's great for Fiji. I think it's going to be a great, just overall tour for the boys over there. So that's going to be awesome. Love to see that. Super Rugby Pacific had some great kind of posts around that. And yeah, I mean, this is what the league needs. This is
Yeah.
what the league needs.
And I think just obviously to get on a serious note here, obviously we are aware of all the crazy stuff that's happening on the West Coast
Yeah.
in Los Angeles with the wildfires and all that happening. Obviously, that's something that transcends sports, and we want to send a message to anyone who might be affected by the Los Angeles fires that you have our best wishes and we hope for a swift and obviously recovery from what has been a horrific and devastating event. But to tie that into what Rugby LA is doing here with Fiji and Drua, they are joining hands in that match as well to fundraise for those affected by the Los Angeles fire. So very, very cool
Perfect.
to see. that, again, a monumental, I think, occasion for an emerging club here in an emerging league with a Super Rugby side to then also make a pretty big impact in the local community as well as it pertains to all that is going on. So again, very, very cool to see Rugby LA having this opportunity to play on. And we'll have to talk with a friend of the show, Andrew Coe, at some point
We
to
will
get
for
his
sure.
thought on the experience it is to play an exhibition against Fijian Drua.
And they're
Outside of the,
sick.
yeah, which is gonna be awesome. Other things that I need to mention, again, when it comes to signings, again, with Nola
Oh,
announcing Jonah Moe coming
Ryan,
back, yes,
New England Free Jacks already announced a special jersey, and the
yes, they
season
did.
hasn't even started,
Hasn't
and
even
it
begun.
doesn't even have any horizontal stripes on it.
It doesn't even have any horizontal stripes. You're right. The New England Free Jacks announcing that Quincy is celebrating their 400th anniversary. So in celebration of that, the Free Jacks
Jeez,
are proud to wear their Quincy 400 City jersey. White and navy has I guess a
a
portrait of
mural.
Quincy, a mural on the back. It's interesting. It's unique. I want to see how the numbers kind of look like
Yeah,
that on
I
the
don't think
back.
there's numbers on there, right? I don't
I
think a
mean, we've
number
seen.
fits on there. Also, why would you want to cover up? I actually haven't looked close up to the mural, but I'm assuming that this is what it is. Why would you want to cover up a number or cover up that mural with a number when that is displaying a time in historic memory when tea was dumped into the river,
Yeah, yeah, that's very
400 years ago?
historically accurate, Maddie. Very, very good, very good. But that's what the Quincy 400 jersey is there for, to get a little picture and snapshot of history, so that Matthew, the history buff, can flex his muscles. Anyways, Quincy 400 city jersey, gonna be pretty
They put
cool.
the
If
numbers
I,
on the front, I'm going to yell.
I don't think there's space for that, but that would be funny. It'd be like, remember, what was it? I think it was Utah, right? Back in the day that had
Gilgronis,
they had the numbers right in
the
the middle of the
stupid
chest.
Gilgroni football jersey. That's why they folded.
Yeah, yeah. So, oh yeah, I completely forgot about those ones. That is true. I forgot about that one.
The
Anyways,
Texas Longhorns.
all right, Maddie, anything else that you need to have? We have good
No, let's get
signings,
into the stupid next
fun
segment.
games, and new
Let's get into
jerseys. Had a little bit
actually
of fun.
no, I'm happy about this segment. You know why? Because we are preaching for more people to join. So I'm excited about this.
Let's
Play the
let's
trumpets,
let's
Ryan.
get right into it.
Yeah.
Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye, hear
Gets
ye.
you fired up, huh, Maddie? Just like the other
Yeah,
bumpers.
just this time though.
Hear ye, hear ye. Here is Supreme Commissioner Yee with a Fantasy Ruckers Leagues update. Yeah, this is probably, if not the most important call to action from this Supreme Commissioner Yee's update. I don't know what is, but again, we announced it for the first time last episode. We're re-announcing it here. The registration for Fantasy MLR 2025 to join a Fantasy Ruckers Fantasy MLR League is open. You can find that link down below in our description. We've posted it on our socials. Anywhere you can find it, you can get it. I just got to fill out a little bit of a questionnaire, a little bit of a form so that we can slot you in the league that fits you best. And you can have a little bit of fun this year in participating in Fantasy MLR, either for the second time or if you're a brand new member. We are welcoming a lot of that. We've had
Yes,
a
sir.
great response so far with the people that are returning, and addition to new people that have joined the club. So to those new people, welcome to the Fantasy Ruckers community. Shout out to you guys. Thank you for joining us. And we should have a lot of fun this season. Again, just a lot of more improvements coming this year, and it's been a wild ride, and we'd love to see it gaining traction and people enjoying it first and foremost. So again, we're just doing our part to try to make Fantasy MLR reality, doing
Yes,
everything we
sir.
can in our power, and the people that have been following along, been joining, registering, have been obviously the whole part of that, and that's who makes it possible, is the people out there like you, the listener, you, the fantasy MLR players that enjoy this and partake in this. That's what makes it fun to do this stuff.
Yep. Couldn't agree more.
So again, just links down below in the description, links down below on our social pages. Register if you haven't already. Even if you were a returning member, please let us know that you will be participating in 2025 by filling out that form. If there's someone that that wants to participate, you can write down in the form, "Hey, I want to be in the same league as one of my friends here." That's an option in
Yeah.
there. Spread the word. Let's get it out. I know our analytics guru Nick Johnson, who is bringing some spicy stuff to the website this season. He basically told his rugby team, that he's a part of. Hey, join this fantasy MLR league, and I'm pretty sure his head coach registered this year. So
Whoa.
yeah, spread the word.
I want to disappoint coach.
It's going to be a lot of it. No, it's going to get Nick in the good books. He's going to be starting every single match now because of this. No doubt
Yeah,
about it.
we'll see.
All right. Well, again, find that link down below. We can't push it enough. The start of the season is less than a month away. We're starting and organizing leagues within the next couple weeks with drafts happening in 3 weeks or so, which is why we're having these rankings coming out, which we'll get into in just a sec. But again, spread the word. Let's make fantasy MLR reality together. All right.
Let's
You ready to get
go.
into the meaty part of stuff, Matt?
Holy cow. Yeah, let's do it.
Preseason warm up.
Whoa.
All right. The
Ryan.
preseason warm up continues.
Ryan, I'm worried. I'm a bit worried. You
What?
alluded to it a bit, but I did want to
Yeah.
bring it up. We're going to be better this year. I think we're going to be better this year. I feel more confident, but at the same time, I feel just as actually, I feel less confident than last year, but
What?
I feel
Wait,
more
what?
confident that we'll do better. Like as in, I feel less confident going into it. I felt really confident last year. I thought I was
Okay.
golden, but I am feeling less confident than when we did this last year. But I am more confident that we will do better than last year.
And just to remind the listeners, how were your top five rankings last year?
Well,
Wait, no comment, no comment. It's all about looking to the future, Maddie. That's all we're doing here. But
or
again,
like 5% hit rate.
I do agree. I did feel like when I was piecing these rankings together, it did feel like with the slew of information, more information that we had heading into this year, having another round of fantasy MLR under our belt, it does feel like
I
there
feel like
is
we
a little
cursed
bit
these
more
guys by putting
confidence.
them in our top five.
It is true. It's just like how me picking my favorite team, who for this season is Rugby LA,
Heinous.
happens to banish themselves from the league. It happened with the Dallas Jackals,
It did.
the Arrows and the Iron Workers, who I was quite fond of in the years before. They banished themselves from the league. So Rugby LA, watch out because I'm all aboard the bandwagon.
Oh
And
man.
we'll see. We'll see you in 2026. Anyways, let's get into these forward rankings, Matt. We're going to be breaking down the top five front row players with some honorable mentions, top five second row players with some honorable mentions, top five back row players with some honorable mentions, and then to go through
Wow.
on the top five forwards that we think of heading into the 2025 season. We'll also mention kind of who were the top five in the season last year to kind of give us a little paint us a picture of some context into maybe the spiciness we're going into our rankings. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of new faces that are entering the league. But Maddie, before we hop right into these rankings and get into the top five front rowers, what was kind of your ideology and your mindset and maybe your strategy when it came to ranking these? The way to give our listeners an idea on how this happened. You and I went into this blind in terms of I didn't look at your rankings, you didn't look at
Hmm.
mine. We just did our
You
top
might have cheated.
fives. No, I did not cheat. I never cheat. I don't cheat. That's not a thing to
I
say.
did them first.
We're on. You did do them first, but then I put mine out there, and we kind of compared notes, and it was interesting to see, for the lack of better terms there, what we kind of differed in certain opinions there. But when it came to overall strategy, what was kind of your thought process here?
Yeah, I mean, look, it really varied for each position. Like front rowers, you're really thinking about the team. You're really thinking about what type of opportunities is that front rower going to get to score tries. You really got to think about the opportunities that they're going to have playing as well. When you look at the front rower, I mean, max they're going to get 50 to 60 minutes. Worst case scenario, they get 30 to 40 minutes. And then second rowers, you're not looking as much at tries. I think we've seen that a couple things with second rowers. Second rowers are very successful when they are versatile and have opportunities in the back row,
Mm-hmm.
like a Frank Lahore. And second rows are also extremely versatile or extremely successful when they are incredible defensively, like a Colin Gross, who's making a bunch of tackles every game. And then back rowers is kind of where you can almost think about it like a back, almost like a center. It's just individual talent. And you're looking
Yeah.
at some of these guys and you're just saying, do you have the opportunity to shine? Are you on the right team to shine? And if so, then hey, you got the talent to do it. Have we seen it historically? Yes, sir. And you're in the top five.
Yeah, Yeah, and I had a very similar thought process there as well, but that same thought process did land us in different spots when it
Sure
came to
did.
certain players in our top five. So let's go into it. Let's jump right in and let's talk about front rowers to begin with. First on what we'll go over and what we'll throw up on the screen now is the top five front rowers from 2024. So we have Andrew Cotron finish off as our
Beast.
best front rower at the number one spot with 122.9 fantasy points. DeWalt Kotza at two for the Dallas Jackals on 100 with 120.8. Dylan Fawcett with the Chicago Hounds 119.9 at number three. Ben Strang as the hooker for Rugby LA 119.8 at the four spot. And then finally to wrap it out in our top five, Pita Ane Asu with the Houston SaberCats 103.7. So obviously some pretty notable names there in that top five, all hookers in those
Yep.
top five there, which I think is going to maybe give you some foresight into how you and I, Maddie, chose our top five heading into this year. Again, if it ain't
Yeah,
broke,
no
don't fix it.
surprise.
If there's a pattern, go
Well,
with
it is
it.
broke.
And that's what we did here. So let's start off with the number five spot. So Maddie, why don't you go first? Who do you have at number five?
Yeah, this is kind of a no-brainer for me. I had to have him in our top five, in my top five at least. Liam Coltman of the Utah Warriors. This is one of the biggest signings I think of the year for Utah. The guy is an absolute just a legend. Like the guy, I think there's a stat out there to where he's played a ridiculous amount of Super Rugby games and has missed a handful. And that's something that you love to see in the MLR. I think that's going to be really, really useful here. And also, he's just like he's the outstanding. They just signed Vugakato, but like he's the outstanding hooker there.
Mhm.
He's going to be the starting hooker. He's going to get a lot of opportunity. I think he's going to get a lot of opportunity there to shine. We saw guys like Henry Bell in the past shine for them. And it was just hard for me to keep him off of my top five.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more there. Again, a guy with a whole plethora of rugby
He's an all black.
experience. Right. And when you have an all black that's coming to the MLR, he's going to look and play differently and play at that next gear and higher level. It's a great signing for the Utah Warriors who are trying to retool and rebuild their franchise. And I think that can begin with the signing of Liam Coltman there to really drive that engine room. For me at number five, I have Pita Ane Asu. So Houston
Interesting.
SaberCats, who finished at number five last season with 103.7 fantasy points, like I mentioned. Again, I think it was hard obviously for this guy to not include him on the list because he's going to be a guy that is part of a team that has a very big emphasis on the forward pack. We know that's how the Houston SaberCats play their game style. We've heard it from the players themselves that that's what they like to do. They play smash mouth rugby that starts from the front. Pita Nesu is a guy that's going to, I think, take advantage of that. He really has the foothold of that front the hooker spot. I can't see anyone really necessarily supplanting that. There is, and we'll get into him a little bit more in our honorable mentions, but Seth Smith is a guy that obviously has shown a lot of promise that is right there, but I still do think that Pita Aneasu is the guy there, and will take advantage of what is a very successful Houston SaberCats forward pack that drove them to their best season last year.
Yeah, I don't think he has to be said. He has to be worried about Seth Smith. I think he's a clear starter. So, yeah, solid top five pick. We'll talk about him more later.
All right, number four. We'll get this out of the way quickly. I had Liam Coltman, so
Yep.
I could not leave Liam Coltman off the list. I think the ceiling for Liam Coltman is higher than Pita Aneasu just because of his caliber of play, which is why I have him slotted at number four. My only pause for concern, I really was trying to get Liam Coltman even higher on my top five list, but he still does play for Utah. And I think there is a little bit of pause for concern with this Utah Warriors side. How much opportunity are they going to get in that offensive area when it comes to driving in that maul, scoring those set piece tries, which is what these hookers take advantage of? I'm just not sure they're going to have that same opportunity as some of these other guys I'm going to mention higher on this list. So that's why for me, Liam Coltman sits at number four. But again, you mentioned all the good things about him and a guy that's going to
Yeah.
come into this league and I think have a stamp on it. For you, number four.
Number four, I got maybe a surprise here, but I got Dylan Fawcett at number four.
Mm.
Look, I think he's an outstanding player, but we saw the impact that he took in his fantasy production when the Chicago Hounds were not doing well. and when they were looking abysmal offensively. I think the Chicago Hounds are going to be a better team, but I think they're going to be still be struggling against some of these teams that had a lot of improvements to their sides. Um, so yeah, that's why I otherwise I would have had Dylan Fawcett higher, but I just think that he's going to still be impacted just by the pure talent of some of these other teams. And I think the Chicago Hounds aren't necessarily going to be a top team, and he might struggle a little bit.
All right. Well, let's then move on to number three. We are in agreement here for the first time
Hey,
on these
well, Quattrin, I
rankings.
don't think he's going to be happy about this.
Yeah. Andrew Quattrin coming in at our number three spot for both myself and Maddie's pick here. New England Free Jacks hooker, 122.9 fantasy points, finished off as the best front rower in all of fantasy MLR. For me, and you can dive into this, Maddie, the concern is it's not necessarily his room entirely anymore. And the positives here is he's playing for the New England Free Jacks, who are expected to come back into the season and dominate once again, be a solid offense, be a team that's able to score tries. I'm just concerned that Quattrin is going to get hurt by some of the signings that they made this offseason. Guys like Connell McInerney. Like there is a world where I can see them either splitting time and somehow McInerney ends up finishing higher from a fantasy production sense than Andrew Quattrin. I think from a again rugby perspective, this is fantastic to have two guys of those caliber kind of
Yep.
running that hooker space is fantastic from a fantasy sense. It hurts because you just don't have that same confidence that Q, friend of the show, Andrew Quattrin, is going to necessarily have that full stranglehold like he did last season, where he was just head and arms above kind of their next option in there. Quattrin was just so good last season, which is why I bumped him down. Still going to be a great option. Still going to have plenty of opportunity for being on the New England Free Jacks. I just don't think that the number one spot is necessarily as much in the cards as maybe some of these other guys that I'm going to mention because of that depth that New England Free Jacks now have at that hooker position.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I agree with you there. I just think that he's a vet on that team. He means so much to that team. He's kind of the heart and soul of that team when you really think about it. I think they're going to have a hard time, and I think if they have respect for kind of Q, and I think they do, it's going to be his spot to lose. So yeah, I agree with you though. We had the same thing. He's at three. He's not at the top. So yeah,
Again, these were games where he was playing, 70 minutes plus, right? I just don't think those opportunities
yep.
come as much, right? Because you have a guy like Connell coming from the back end. But again, yeah, I think that's why you both and you and myself haven't bumped down. Again, great option. I think that these top three guys, at least for me, they're in a tier above kind of what we've been talking about so far. And I think if you get Andrew Quattrin, you're quite happy here with that pick here. Going on to number two, Maddie, who do you have at the number two
So
spot?
this is where I drop in Pina Neasu,
Mm,
and I just think that I mean, the guy ends up being the front row five last year after being out, I think, at least 3 or 4 games.
mhm.
And we saw just how not just electric he was. He didn't really need the mauls because he was so athletic. Like he was just ridiculous on the field. He was everywhere. He was a great ball carrier. So that's why I think he improves this year. I think he hits up in two. I think Houston continues to be that dominant forward pack and continue to punish teams with their forward back, and he's going to be a big part of that.
And I think this is where this will differ in terms of the guy that I'm going to talk about number two. I think Pita Ionescu, again, it's just not the flashy pick, right? I think he's so safe that floor is so stable for that. I mean, you look at his stats in the games he played, he never scored lower than, 4 or 5 fantasy points, right? And at a front row position, that is fantastic. And he always
Mhm.
hovered around that 6 to 7 mark, which again, at the front row position is fantastic. And then you add in that ceiling of, he can score a try, taking advantage of the solid team that is the Houston SaberCats. You can turn those 6, 7, 8 point performances to 15-point performances. Again, a guy that's stable, just not as flashy, at least for me, which is why I had him at number five. For me, the flashy pick here, number two for me, Ben Sugars of Rugby
Mhm.
LA. Obviously a brand new guy
Battle of the Bends.
coming into this season. This is, yes, Battle of the Bends. Obviously, Ben Strang finishing off as the front row four last year was an awesome, awesome pick. And I think he's a guy that a lot of people kind of picked off waivers, to be honest, and
I
wasn't
did.
necessarily a guy that people were relying on going into the drafts. Now, what concerns me, and this is why I almost had Ben Sugars up at that number one spot, comes with a whole bunch of pedigree when it comes to the experience that he has, and everything that he brings to the table now being with LA. It's just what concerns me is that they do have bench strength, and there is a situation where you can just flop bench strength into this spot where he finishes off as the front row too. The reason why I have insert LA hooker here is because I think LA's, and maybe I'm pulling a Chicago here for our longtime
You
listeners,
are.
where you're just so high on a team where you're buying all in. I just think that the offensive firepower for Rugby LA heading into the season is just so high that the opportunities that these two are going to find themselves in scoring spots, whether that be off the set piece or be at opportunities where they're within the five and just drive a ball in and pick and go, I think is going to be there. The concern for me is it going to be Ben Sugars, who has that pedigree from overseas and can just translate that here on a new team? Or is it going to be the guy we're familiar with in Ben Strang, who did it last season, can do it even better because he's on a team that is revamped, retooled, and has an even higher skill level, at least it appears to be heading into this season.
Yeah, I mean, solid pick. I don't know. I think it's Ben Strang's job to start. Look, Ben Sugars is a young guy coming out of England, played for the Waratahs for like 4 or 5 caps, but um, yeah, I just think Ben Strang still has that a bit of experience over him, just with a bit of a bit more experience over him coming from New Zealand. Um, it's a tough one though, Rep. It is a tough one. I
Like
agree.
I think Ben Sugars is exciting for me because again, the Waratahs, all of that in that experience. But again, I think if I could, and it would be copping out if I did, I would
You
have
are.
liked to put Rugby LA hooker in this number
Yeah,
two
that would be
spot.
copping
But
out.
that's copping out. So again, Ben Sugars is my pick, but I can see Ben String or Ben Sugars in this number two spot.
Yeah, we're
All
gonna
right.
say Ben Sugars at the end of the year.
Let's go now to our number one spot on this list. This one I think is where we get a little bit controversial in terms
Hmm.
of the differing, not controversial in the sense where these are both adequate picks, but where you and I differ the most in terms of who we think. So I will go first here, and I have Dylan Fawcett as my number one pick. Maddie, you had him at number four. For me, the sole reason was I get it, right? Chicago had a down year, didn't look as good, but we've seen Dylan Fawcett be at his utmost highest potential before. If Chicago can just rebound and even get a little bit better, I think the opportunity increases. I mean, he finished off as front row number three in a down year. But the thing that really solidifies it for me is that Dylan Fawcett is the guy in Chicago, right? When you look at that roster, there's no one even remotely close that I can think of here that is going to compete for what Dylan Fawcett provides to that space. Fawcett is a guy that plays 70 minutes. He's basically a back row player that plays at the hooker position, and I think that's very unique. It's just going to be very, very dependent on whether or not Chicago can take that step up from what they did last year. Fawcett has been our front row one before. He can get back there this year. It's going to largely depend on, like I said, how Chicago plays in 2025.
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, when they were turning it on, and remember, a lot of last year was that whole Billy Meeks at 10 experiment, which didn't work. But when they turned it on at the end of the year, Dylan Fawcett also reaped the rewards from that. For me, I mean, a little bit surprising here, but I've got good reasoning for it. I got Joe Taufetti, Big
Mhm.
Joe. Joe Taufetti, now Nola Gold at number one, being the front row 8 last year. You got to think, what the heck is this guy thinking? But I think I have a similar logic to you, Rye, of the LA thing, except there's no debate here. Like Pat O'Toole got signed, yes, but Big Joe is going to be the guy in NOLA. And the fact that they're going to be a much improved team. I mean, you look at the roster on paper, they are going to be much better this year. Um, and I just see that he's going to reap the rewards. He's gonna get the field position to be able to have the opportunity to score tries. He's going to have the opportunity there to just make an impact and have go forward ball. And yeah, I just think he's going to take a big step up and end up being the front row one this year.
The only reason why I didn't have Big Joe on my list is, again, I think there's a little bit pause. We've bought into this Nola Gold hype before. And I think there's a little bit of fatigue when it comes to that in terms of the skill level. I get it.
I
There's
don't
new
think
players
so.
coming into this season. But what kind of hammered it home for me, again, Big Joe, he just made it outside my top five. Honorable mention here that we'll talk about in some of the guys here. But Nola last year was the one of the worst teams when it came to front row point production. Their highest player in terms of a guy that scored points was Augusto Bohm at 46 and a half points. Again,
But that's because they had a carousel of hookers in
sure.
there.
So
Like
those
this is
point
not the same carousel anymore. You got Joe Taufetti, you're starting Joe Taufetti.
that's true. That's true.
And
So
their team was pretty up and down last year. Like this we've I've said that they're going to be a good team before, but this year they've amped it up in every way. Like on the field, off the field, you
do we
feel a
have
different
a
vibes
book at
riding there.
bets?
A bucket bets of what?
I don't know, something NOLA based. We'll get back to
I got nothing right now, but we'll have something.
that. I guess before we get into the honorable mentions, Maddie, guy you're most confident finishes in this top five that's within your top five, guy that you're most worried finishes outside your top five that's in this spot.
Uh, I think Fawcett feels like a pretty safe bet here. Finishing somewhere in this top five. Probably the biggest worry is honestly like Liam Coltman. Like
Yeah, yeah, that's me
any
too.
new guy, I think you're just going to end up being a bit worried about their impact, where they're going to have what is their like. They might have completely different expectations of making this
Hmm.
signing, right? Like,
Hmm.
um, but he went to Utah. I don't know why he'd go to Utah other than to play rugby. So, yeah,
Mine is probably obviously, I agree with you with Dylan Fawcett. Ben Sugars is probably the one that I'm probably
yeah,
getting most
yeah.
sweaty
That one's a
about.
pretty tough one.
But again, I think if you caveat it with
No
LA
caveat.
hooker here,
No
maybe it
caveat.
makes it look a
That's
little bit
it's not
less
count. You
less thing.
wrote down
Again,
Ben Sugars.
I'm telling the people, pick Rugby LA hooker. Pick both of them. Pick a tandem. Handcuff them.
Well,
We'll see. Honorable mentions for me. We talked about a lot of them. Seth Smith, Conal McIlnerney. We talked about Ben Strang. You mentioned, Joe Taufetti. He's up there for me. I think a guy a lot of people will be talking about is the absence of Devalt Kotza out of our top five list.
eh,
He's made it to my honorable mention. Again, he finished off as the front row to 120.8. For me, I think the play style between Seattle and Dallas is very differing. Obviously, DeWalt took advantage of a very dynamic Dallas Jackals offense there. Um, any particular reason for you, Maddie, why DeWalt Kotza can't break your top five? Like, where does
I
he
mean,
sit?
I also just think there's also the opportunity side. Right? Like they've signed another South African
Yeah,
hooker.
Karan Van Buren.
Uh, yeah, so I think they have another one too. Like they have three hookers in that room, I think. So it's just a bit of a tougher situation. Like, yes, he won the spot last year, but I think it's a bit of a tougher situation. And historically, like Joe Taufetti at front row eight was the highest front rower for Seattle. Like, despite how good they were, it wasn't like their front rowers often reap those, like, get the benefits of how good of a team they are. And we've just seen that historically. So that's why, and I've been saying, I think Dewell Coatsy takes a bit of a step back.
Sure. Only other guy that I'll mention before you get into your honorable mentions, Matt. I want to mention Jake Turnbull.
Yep, I had him.
He's the lone non-hooker that I
Mm.
have on this list. He finished off last season.
He's a lone non-hooker in the top 10, right?
Yeah, 91
Last
point
year.
91.3 fantasy points last season. He's a guy, he's a workhorse, right? We had him on the show. Obviously he's a big part of that
Got tight lips.
Anthem Rugby Carolina squad. He finishes off as the front row 8 in our rankings, or excuse me, front row 7 in our rankings at that 91.3 fantasy points. And it just largely based off of a guy that plays a lot of minutes, averaged at least above 65 to 70 minutes, double digit tackles in almost every match, and throws in the try here and there with the meters gain. He's your rare outlier where he's a guy that won't start your hooker position, but will still be very fantasy relevant for you. Obviously, that ceiling is capped because he's not a hooker, but I would still be very happy if you need a late round flyer for a guy and you've missed out on a lot of the hookers. Jake Turnbull would be a great option, I think. In
And don't forget, he's the
first.
captain of this squad. He's going to be on the field. He's the captain of the team. He's going to be on the field. Some guys, Rod, that I had in my honorable mentions that you haven't mentioned already. Martin Vaca.
Hmm.
We can't forget about Old Glory DC. I don't think they're going to be particularly a great team, but he's still going to produce the way that Martin Vaca produces. He still ended up being front row six last year, despite Old Glory DC being Old Glory DC.
Hmm.
And then Hugh Roach, I had. You just got to throw in a Sandy. Like Hugh Roach, I think is one of those guys that I have a hard time leaving out because of the type of athleticism and the type of hooker that he is. So yeah, it's tough for me to leave him out of at least the honorable mentions. So I had to put him in there.
Guy you left out of your top five that you're worried could sneak in.
Probably Ben Strain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's I think I agree there too. All right. Let's move on to second rows, Maddie.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
I like this one kind
All
of.
right. This one, second rows was tough. We had obviously a slew of options when it came to the front row position. Obviously had a kind of a criteria there when it came to hookers. For second row, it was tough. And there you're gonna see here there
I
is
think I
a
crushed this one.
you think you crushed this one.
I think I
Okay.
crushed this one. I feel pretty
Okay.
good about this one.
Okay. All right. All right. So last year's top five second rows, you got Frank Lahore with 168.2 fantasy points, Jason Dam,
I
141.3
watched film,
fantasy
right?
points, Geronimo Gomez Vara for Dallas,
It's kind of
124.3.
cheating.
Mason Flesh, 101.6 at the four spot. Max Kadieko for LA, 96.6 fantasy points. And I had to throw this in there because we are going to be talking about him obviously finishing in the sixth spots. A guy that didn't even play that many games because of injury. Sam Gawlis still manages to get up there in the sixth spot with 91
Yeah.
fantasy points.
And
Um,
hey, Geronimo Gomez, that's a bit of a cheat there.
it is. Obviously back row, largely in his portions there, finished off with second row eligibility. But again, to your point, Maddie, before when you're talking about kind of how you
That's what we're
were
looking for.
it's what you're looking for, those outliers. And you'll notice that there are a lot of guys that are in this section that do split their time at second row, back row. That's the key. If they can maintain that second row eligibility, doesn't matter where they start. There's guys that
Yes,
ride
sir.
that. There's that guys that ride that line pretty tightly. I think there's one guy in particular that we'll probably talk about here that I have just missing my list because of that concern, and you have on the list, but we'll get into it. Let's start at number five. I have Rhino Herbst at my
Ooh,
five spot here. Seattle Seawolves
very good looking man.
long time, and his name's Rhino. I mean, come on, right? Like outside of Leaky Chan Tung, like Rhino Herbst is right up there with the best names in the
Not
entire
agree.
MLR. 78.2 fantasy points, finish us off as the second row 11. But I think where I came to the caveat here, I would not be surprised, and I probably don't want to be starting off my rankings list by saying this, but I wouldn't be surprised if Rhino Herbst misses the top five list.
All right. So
However,
how are we supposed to?
it's going to feel like a top five pick because
Oh
of the
yeah.
consistency he shows throughout the season. I mean, this is a guy at the second row position that is going to get you at least 6 points every single week. And this is what he has consistently done
You beat out these
every
back
single
rows.
time he has been doing that. And this is a pure second row player. You're not going to have to worry about the eligibility concerns like some of these other guys. So when it comes to a pure lock, a pure second row guy, Rhino Hurst makes my list. He doesn't use the cheat code that is to get in those back row minutes. This is a pure second
Ain't
row
nothing wrong with
pick.
that.
Number five spot, Rhino Herbst, 78.2 fantasy points. He can break the top five.
Yeah, maybe, but you're giving people a lot of doubt here. I got a newcomer coming in at my number five, Sam Caird for the New England Free Jacks, a new signing coming out of Waikato. Also played for the Blues, I think. But yeah, I watched some film on him, and I think he's going to fit pretty perfectly in this New England Free Jacks
Watch some film.
defense.
What film are you watching?
Oh, I watched film. Don't you worry. Look, he's just a high work rate, just like really great in the tackle and a defensive beast. This guy is going to fit perfectly in that New England Free Jack defense. And I think for that reason, he's going to be racking up tackles and it's going to just pick up points that way and occasionally put one in. I think that's kind of the perfect recipe for a top five in the second row. I'm pretty sure he's a pure second row, pure lock. And frankly, he's not going to fit in that back row room anyway. So, he's my kind of pure second rower, and he's gonna be an absolute stud, I think.
All right. Let's move on to then number four. For number four for me, I have Justin Basson, another
Ooh.
pure second row player. This is
Why are you
a
handcuffing yourself like this?
because the people are going to look back and they're going to have a guy that you're going to have in your four spot, which we'll get into, and they're going to realize that they're going to lose him at second row eligibility 3 games into the season.
Dom
But
Dom.
nonetheless, I go with another safe route. If you need a second row, I don't need to rely on a guy that's going to lose that eligibility. Justin Basson is like a rich man's Rhino Herbst. 73.7 fantasy points, actually finished lower than Rhino,
How do you
but
call him a rich man's Rhino Herbst if you finish lower?
he's on a better team from a forward sense on the Houston
Okay.
SaberCats, a team that emphasizes play from that forward pack. This is a guy that missed a handful of games, so again, that ceiling there is up when it comes to the potential he has heading into the season. He's had games where he's ran more than 40 meters. He averages double-digit tackles every single game. Last year in round one, 20 tackles. Round 15, 16 tackles. Again, a guy that never scored lower. Never, ever, ever, ever. Rhino, you had some games here and there where you were quite disappointed. Justin Basson never had a game lower than 4.2 at the second row position. You were very happy with that. Again, he's not going to have your blow up games. He's not going to score you 15 plus points. He might not even score you 10 plus points all season long.
Oh,
But
that's concerning.
when you have a guy that's going to just get you what you need to get, again, we're going to talk about draft strategy later as the preseason warm-up continues episode by episode. It's all about roster construction. And if you have a guy that can explode for those points for you, you want a position at the second row that can just get you those 6 points, cash out, check out, and you'll be able to win your matchups handedly. Justin Basson is a guy that I do like in terms of his consistency. Now talk about your pick, Maddie.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good pick. The one concern I have with Bassan is I think some of those games he missed are just simply because he just wasn't in the lineup. Like uh eh, Houston has, I think they still have Nathan Denholt. Um, and they've got Johan Mumson. So that's a tough one. But hey, I like the pick. I like the pure second row pick. But my second row pick for number four is going to be good old Jason Dom. This guy is now we're getting into some of these versatile second
Mhm.
rowers, these athletic second rowers, the athletic giraffes. Um, this man has spent some time at back row, a lot of time at back row last year. I think he's going to end up being more of a lock this year, but still have that same athleticism, still have that same opportunity on a great LA team. LA makes a bunch of signings. They bring back Kunatani, they bring in Ed Timpson, they bring in Ben Houston. I think that they're going to be kind of set in that back row room, and Jason Dom's going to be that stalwart in that second row. Um, and yeah, I think he's going to do well and still end up being that number four second rower.
I have him just outside my top five on the sole reason why I am just so worried that he is going to lose that second row eligibility. I mean, again,
Oh,
maybe it's a thing. Maybe it's a
I did
thing
put
where
Nate Oxberger in my nine ranking, didn't I?
maybe it's a thing where a problem for a later day. But this is a guy that didn't have his first second row appearance until round nine. He finished off the season.
That's also because Kunatani never wasn't playing much in the early start
Sure,
of the year.
sure. And he did play second row from rounds 14 to 16. So we shall see. Again, I think we'll get into guys that we're worried about, and this is one that I have worried out in my top five. All right. I think we're pretty much almost hand in hand when it comes to the three guys that we're going to mention in our top three of our second row rankings. It just depends on the order. Now, I'll go at number three, Jed Holloway, new signing for the San Diego Legion, a guy that brings a whole bunch of experience, obviously has played for the Wallabies, has experience with the Waratahs, has that build where he can play like that back row athletic, like you mentioned, giraffe, for lack of better terms there. Jed Holloway, if San Diego can even also make that step up into the fast-paced offense that they want to play, especially with the returning of Richard Judd, Holloway is going to be a slam dunk pick, and I think he's going to be excellent for fantasy managers out there. Obviously, a little bit of concern on the unknown. That's why I have him at number three. But if you're in on him, like go all the way. And I think Jed Holloway has the like potential to be number one. Like the guys that I've mentioned so far, they will not. I guarantee you, Rhino Herbst and Justin Basson will not finish anywhere higher
You
than
eat
second
your
row
words,
four,
buddy.
right?
Um,
But
Yeah,
I think
they're gonna make you eat your words. They're listening to this and they know. They're
Jed
gonna.
Hall. I mean, hey, if they do that, I mean, that just makes me look good. Jed Holloway, though, has the ceiling to finish off as the number one. I
Yeah,
have him
Ryan,
at
what
number
should I
three.
do? Should I say my three or should I just say where I put Jed Holloway?
No, why don't you say number three?
All right, well, I got number three. I got Frank Lahore.
Okay.
And it's tough not to put him in there. Like he is an absolute mutant with the ball. Like he is an absolute mutant. And we enjoyed we talked about him every week last year. Like every week we kind of had a conversation about, hey, like, where is this? Like, how good is Frank Lahore? How good is
Hmm.
Frank Lahore? And ends up being a guy that kind of is a sleeper and comes out of nowhere. But he really was the perfect versatility guy. Like he switched every game from second row to back row, from second row to back row, from second row to back row, and keeps that second row eligibility throughout the year while getting those back row minutes. I think he's going to continue to have a similar type of impact. Even at second row, he's a guy that and produces a lot. Putting double digit points majority of the weeks that he's played. I think he's going to continue to do so on a team Utah middle of the pack, but I think they'll be better than last year.
All right, number two. We're in agreement here at number two. Sam Gola
Oh, Sammy.
moves over from the Dallas Jackals to the Anthem Rugby Carolina squad.
Yeah.
91.8 fantasy points in a shortened, injury-ridden season. Last season, we saw what this guy did the fantasy MLR season before that. I mean, Sam Gola is Sam Gola, and he's a guy too that you are not going to have to worry about him losing second row eligibility, right?
Yeah, he's going to be a pure second rower. It'll be like it's hard to say because do we know what we don't know what the rest of this roster looks like.
You
But
just had to
like,
confirm that.
yeah, but like you think I think they have Makeen Ali Khan. Like I think that's one of the guys. But like I just I think they're going to want to develop him at second row. I forget what he played for the Eagles, but like, yeah, I think you shouldn't be too concerned. He's still going to be the same be that same athlete. In the start of the season with for Dallas, before he got hurt, he was primarily playing second row, but kind of had the freedom and athleticism of a back row, and I think that's what we expect this season. And he's going to frankly be the star of that team.
And again, I get any of these top three guys, I can see finishing as the number one second rower of the year, right? Like Sam
Yep.
Gola has that potential too. Again, did 91.8 fantasy points. Like he finishes off as the second row six, with the amount of games that he played. I'm gonna pull it up here in terms of what he had. Um, like the guy only played in 10 matches, started nine of them, and I mean half the season, a little over half the season, and finishes off as the second row six. Like, I mean, it's a combination, double-edged swords in terms of what it tells you about the second row position from a point
Whoa.
scoring framework when it comes to strategy, but also just tells you how many leagues above guys like Sam Gola, guys like Jed Holloway and Frank Lahore are when it comes to the second row position. Um,
Yeah, you set it up. You set
I
it up.
mean, I'm gonna go to my number one, Matt. You mentioned him. You have him at number three. There's no way that I was not putting him here. But Frank Lahore, there's a little bit of sentimental value. I had him in my fantasy season, was just a mutant for me.
Yeah.
But he 168.2. Like, I mean, he was 27 points higher than the next highest scoring second row position, right? And like when you have that anomaly of a guy, like you just can't overlook it. Yes, I get it. Utah probably has taken a step back this year, but again, Frank Lahore is just incredible. Obviously, we don't know what Jed Holloway is going to do
Be a
in
beast.
this upcoming season. That kind of alludes to what you have and where you have him, Maddie. But I wasn't going to dethrone Frank Lahore until I see otherwise.
Yeah, and I kind of had to put Jed Holloway. I mean, like the guys, the guy has so much experience just with the Waratahs. Um, yeah, with the Waratahs, with the Wallabies. 103 appearances for the Waratahs. Uh, Pretty tough. Like pretty tough
Yeah.
to not put a guy in that class. And the other thing that when we're talking, like you watch his play and he is a mobile lock. Like he is a mobile second rower. He's got great ball skills as well. He's going to be good in the tackle too. I just think, he's going to be a star of this San Diego team in that second row. And I can see him being very effective fantasy wise and on the field.
Yeah. No, I get that. Now, in terms of just strategy quickly to put into there, my thought here is if Frank Lahore, Sam Gola, Jed Holloway, if those guys get scooped up and you can't get them, I am punting the second row position. I maybe throw Jason Dom in that
Hey,
conversation. If you're comfortable, I'm not so comfortable, but if you're comfortable with him being in the second row and he's not going to lose eligibility, then maybe you can throw him in that conversation. But um,
maybe, but hey, I think Ryan, you bring up to kind of a great leeway to my honorable mentions because my honorable mentions are all new guys, and I think we've got a lot of new MLR blood coming in here that's our quality talent.
all right. I'll kick
Like
you
I
off with the
think
first one. The only guy that I have in my honorable mention, because I think that lowly of the second row position when it comes to fantasy production,
James,
is Gavin Thornberry. So why don't you tell
yeah,
me
he's a
about
tall
Gavin
lad.
Thornberry?
Yeah, I mean, look, like when it comes to like, first of all, he's a tall lad. All right. He's a tall lad. Like that just is what it is. Uh, but he comes in with tons of experience, right? Like playing for Glasgow, um, for a guy playing for Glasgow, like that is I'm just gonna make sure. I wanna make sure. I'm fact checking myself, Ryan, live. Live.
What do you mean?
Not Glasgow. Connacht. For a guy who played for Connacht, like 75 caps for Connacht, that's like no easy feat. Like staying alive on that on the team like Connacht and then moving to the Northampton Saints, like that's not an easy feat. He's a big boy. He's gonna
Six
get
eight.
yeah, he's gonna be making tackles. He may not be the most kind of try scoring guy, but I think he'll be there defensively. Um, he'll be there defensively for sure for a Utah team that I think he's going to be kind of like the staple in that second row. Other guys I got Frederico Gutierrez for the Miami Sharks. Um, he's he's a guy that I think is another athletic second rower. He looks like he's got a strong carry. Looks like he's got a high work rate. He's a guy who played for the Jaguars, won championships with the Jaguars. I'm pretty sure started in every game that season for them. Um, and yeah, he's like, I think this Miami team, they're going to be okay, but I think we've seen guys like Thomas Caceres, second rowers do well for this Miami Sharks team, and I can see him doing the same. The last guy that I got is, I believe this is the guy who played for Glasgow, Hamish Bain, the Scotland man, who did come out of Glasgow. Uh,
Yeah.
what are you laughing at?
Just it's funny. You're just fact checking yourself throughout the whole.
I
It's
am.
good.
I'm
It's good.
fact checking.
It's
I'm
good.
making
It's
sure.
good.
I'm making sure we're giving good information. But yeah, I think Hamish Bain as probably Hamish, not Hamish. Hamish Bain uh, is a guy who can
That's
come
as
in.
Scottish of a name as it gets, huh?
Hamish, yeah, come in and for a Chicago team, I think he's going to be. He's one of their signings. He's going to start for them. Again, I think the Chicago team's going to be okay, and I think he's going to have a nice little impact for them.
All right. So again, I'm on the wholehearted
Ah, I
side.
just
And
I just say well what I'm saying is these guys like they're not going to be too well known and I think you'll be able to hold off and wait to get these guys, but it doesn't mean you're punting it. I think these guys are going to be good. It just means that you might be able to get these guys later in the round. Well, maybe not anymore, but you should be able to get them later in the round.
all right. Now let's get to probably I think your and myself's.
Brian, the closer we get to the backs, the better we get.
It's true. It is very, very true. But either way, we'll finish off and wrap up the forwards rankings here with the final forward position, the back row position, which is probably the spiciest of positions, if in not only the forwards, but possibly all of fantasy MLR positions, just because of how much
It is.
fantasy
And they're fun to watch.
discrepancy. They're fun to watch, and just the point production that they have. Again, we've mentioned on the show before about kind of positions that provide you with a lot of points. The center position does that, consistent, a lot of points, I should say. The back row does that through tackles. The fly half does that through kicking. But again, from the forward standpoint, back row is the fun one, and I had probably the most fun coming together
Oh
with
yeah.
these top five rankings. So let's go into last year's top five. Last year's top five was Semi Kunatani, which I will say, which was interesting, that Rugby LA, when they announced the return of Semi Kunatani, listed him as a lock. So
Yeah, that's kind of messed up.
we'll see. I mean, he might be the most biggest cheat code in all of fantasy MLR if that guy plays at the lock position and continues to do what he does. Either way, our expectation is that he still plays in the back row. Sam Tuifua finished in number two spot with 154.1. But just to give you a snapshot of just how crazy Semi Kunitani's season was, 214.5. If you do the math there quickly, like 60 points more than the next back row position. He was the only back rower or any forward, period, to surpass the 200 point mark. I mean, incredible what Kunatani did. But Tuifua, 154.1 at number two. Jonah Moe at 150.9 at number three. Jason Dom had that back row eligibility, 141.3 at number four. And then Manuel Ardeo at number five with 137.3. So our names on this list, I think, are going to differ a little bit. It's going to include guys that have been on this top five, guys that haven't. Let's start off at number five position. I had to find a way to throw him on my list. I think he's going to go under the radar this year because of the injury, and I don't think guys are going to be picking him as high as necessarily they should be, but I got to go with Vian Conradi. 83 and a half
Mm.
fantasy points here at the number five position, finished off as the back row 27. Obviously, a very disappointing season, large in part due to the injury that he suffered that ended his 2024 season. Played the first 8 rounds, out with the injury for the rest of the season, and was still able to rack up double-digit fantasy points in every single one of those matches except for two. And that's exactly what you want to see from the back row position. If you extrapolate that out for a full 17 game, I mean, he's finishing among the top of the back row players. And you throw in a couple of those explosive games. I think Vian Conradi will right the ship this year. I get it. There's a busy back row room in New England, but Vian Conradi is a guy that I think the franchise looks largely and very high up to, and I think he's going to be the centerpiece of that back row room still.
Yeah, it's a solid number five. Yeah, that busy back row room does scare me though a little bit. I get a bit scared about the opportunities and kind of the rest and who they play and who they
Mhm.
decide to play. But we'll see. For me at number five, I got a new guy here, Brad Wilkin, for San Diego Legion, coming out of Australia. Ryan, you know what sold me on this one?
What?
He's played sevens. Any back rower that has played sevens, it gives you a lot of hope.
Semi Kunitani.
Yep, Semi Kunatani. When it comes to type of athleticism and the type of player that they are, he will probably not be playing eight for San Diego. It'll probably be like Tavita Tamala or something like that. But even him at the flanker spot, like I think he's going to be a really great addition. I think he played for the Rebels as well. Yeah, I think Brad Wilkin has the opportunity to be a really high scoring back rower with meters gained, with tackles, and potentially tries too.
Yeah. So Brad Wilkin for you at five.
And he's
Vian,
kissed with fire.
he's kissed with fire. Vian Conradi at number five for me. Let's go to number four. This is where we get interesting. And I think this will make more sense. So as we go bigger on the list. But for me, I'm going to write down Sam Tuifua. Finishes off as your back row number two last year, 154.1. We've talked about it on the show before. He's just so explosive in that open style play, something that the Dallas Jackals played a lot of.
Well,
He moves over to Houston, who doesn't
mhm.
play that sort of expansive style. However, he does go to a team that has a big emphasis on production from the forward pack. So I drop him down from that number two spot, which he finished in 2024, down to number four because of that change. But I still think Sam Tuifua is Sam Tuifua. He's going to get opportunity to be explosive. And if it's not going to be the game style that is going to attribute that, I think he finds himself in spots where he's going to be able to use that skill, break out for a 50-meter run because he got a ball that just uses that athleticism to go through. Again, I
Ah,
think that ceiling is definitely dropped from when he played on Dallas, but I do think like we watched Sam Tuifua and I watched him. He was my pick for my Oval E rare card that I still currently have, my NFT Sam Tuifua. And maybe that's part in why I have a close connection to Tuifua, but I do think that explosive ability is still there. It's going to get dampened by the way that Houston plays, but I think there's going to be opportunity for him for athleticism to show at times, just not as much as in Dallas.
yeah. I just don't see it. I don't see him being the starting eight. I think they're gonna go with Ronan Murphy. I mean, with the season that he had last year, I think you kind of have to. Um, the other thing is like when I watched Tuifua, a lot of his meters gained were times where he found himself out on the wing, out on the outside channels, and I just don't think he's going to get that opportunity. But yeah, he is Sam Tuifua. He is a guy that's just difficult to take down, and definitely could end up in the top five. Uh, go ahead, right?
No, no, no. Go for your number four. I was gonna tee you up.
Number four. I mean, I'm gonna go with another new guy, a guy who was hyped up by Nola
You
Gold,
love your new
a
guys.
guy with yeah, I do love my new guys. I had this every year. A guy with 100+ caps for Montpellier, I think a handful of caps for France. Helen Galetier, for Nola Gold. He's probably gonna be the starting 8 man for Nola. And yeah, again, this team is going to be solid. And I think they play a lot through their back row. Like you saw the success that Jonah Moe had. And they're going to be just even more expansive, have the opportunity to be even faster moving, be more expansive, get more front foot ball. And we just see how dangerous he's going to be when he gets that front foot ball. And this guy, like Kellen Galatier, like he's a hard runner. He's a hard tackler. And he's coming with a lot of experience to this squad. So I think that's why I have him at number 4 in my top 5.
I guess that'll just segue right into my number three spot because that's where I have Kellen Galatier for me. I have him
Yep.
at number three. I think the opportunity for him is fantastic. Again, we saw what Jonah Moe did last year, which we'll kind of allude to here as we talk more about this Nola back row room. But I think Kellen Galatier, obviously one of Nola's biggest signings. I don't really need to beat a dead horse. I think Maddie, you said everything there that
Yeah.
Galatier brings to the table. You at
And
number three.
number 3, I mean, I could not leave this guy out of my top 5. Like this dude is an absolute menace. And one of the reasons why is he is willing to kick dudes in the head. Uh,
That's why I don't have him on my top five.
but the fact that he did get suspended for the last 3 games, and still ends up as a back row 6. I mean, Dylan Nell did everything that you want to see out of a back row. The guy had a lot of meters gained. The guy was able to score tries. He was able to make a lot of tackles, and hey, he was an absolute monster at the breakdown. I swear he had at least one breakdown steal every game. That's why Dylan Nell has to be my top 5, and honestly, he's in my top 3. And I think he's going to continue with that success and play a full season this year because he knows now, no stomping on people's heads.
All right, moving on to number two. This is where I guess we'll both say it here. We agree on this one. Jonah Moe is at number two.
Whoa.
We saw what he did last year. Maddie, you had him on your fantasy team.
Yeah,
Um,
and
and and I believe he was your overly
he
NFT
is my
card.
Oval E and an Oval E NFT rare card, yes. And I do want to say, like, if people are worried about the fact that Kellen Galatier is coming in and playing 8, just remember Jonah Moe started majority of his games at 7 last year, and this he still had the type of production that he had. Everybody saw the type of ball carrier he was inside the 22. This guy is an absolute beast, and he knew how to score tries. He had a nose for the try zone. He just knew how to do it. Absolute weapon. Yeah, this guy, he's definitely going to be in the top 3 this year.
I think long story short is that I think you and I are both confident that Nola can provide two top five back row. There is a round
Yes.
possibilities here for them to
Yes.
do that. All right. I mean, I guess we don't need to touch long on this. You could probably guess it who our number one pick is going to be, but I mean,
Semi.
Semi
I've got a
Kunatani.
semi
Uh,
for
yeah,
semi.
got a semi for semi. Um, 214.5 fantasy points, like we mentioned last year. Back row run is on a revamped Rugby LA side that looks incredible on paper. And Kunatani should take advantage of that. This is a guy that was a league winner. I think in drafts that take place in the next handful of weeks here, I think Semi Kunatani, no question, goes in the top 3, right? Like I think he's off the board.
He has to, and then you know what's going to happen. He's going to
Right.
there's thing. That's what
There's
happens.
things that
That's
are
what happens in the
there's
fantasy Ruckers
there's
MLR
there are
fantasy
things that are
leagues.
consistent here. If you make our top 5 list, you probably have a down year. It's like almost like the Madden curse. If you get selected in the top 3 picks, you don't do as good.
Oh,
And
it
if you
is.
become Ryan's favorite team, you end up getting banished from MLR.
Jeez.
Either way, Semi Kunatani, again, I think he'll be a lock in for a top 3 pick this
Yeah.
season. There's really nothing. It explains itself.
Yeah, I'm not even going to say anymore because yeah, Semi Kunatan. And by the way, just to kind of put even more pour money in this basket. I don't even know what the phrase would be. Uh,
Eggs in this
but
basket.
more eggs in this basket. He didn't start the first half of the season.
You're right.
He came out the bench, and then he came out the bench sometimes at the end of the game and decides, hey, I'm going to score tries anyways. Put me on
Yeah.
for 30 minutes, coach. Let me just score a couple. Absolutely ridiculous. And the team is much improved. They're going to continue to play the same style of rugby. Andrew Coe, we talked to Andrew Coe, and I think he expects them to play the same style of rugby too. And that only is going to continue to provide for his opportunity. Ryan, I got to talk about this. We got to bring this up. We have left some big names out of this top five. One of the big names that we have left out of this top five is a guy who was, I think, the all-time, like one of the all-time try scorers almost ever for the MLR. I don't know if that's accurate, but he scored a lot of tries and he put a lot of needles in his butt. Ryan Reichert Hadding.
Yeah.
Reichert Hadding.
Riekert Hadding
Reichert, how do we leave him out of the top five?
So he's on my honorable mentions, along with I will say Dylan Nell is there too. I know you have him on your top
Liar.
five. Dylan Nell's on my honorable mention, because of kind of that maybe discipline
No
discipline
needles,
type
though.
stuff. That's true. But Riekert Hadding, again, we've seen him absolutely dominate the league, right? And when he was at his peak, especially when it came to fantasy MLR, like this guy he was the original Semi
At his
Kunitani,
peak.
right? Stop it. Um,
He can
I'm
have his
just
peak
I'm
again.
I am just so concerned about the injury. He hasn't played a full season in back-to-back years,
Hmm.
which has really hampered his ability. Stop it. And he hasn't surpassed that 100-point fantasy mark. If he plays a full 16, 17 match season, he makes the top five. I don't think there's any question about it. It's just whether or not he's going to do that. I'm not going to spend high draft capital on him with that concern. It might be one of these picks that you're looking back on. You're like, damn, Riekert Hadding was sitting there for me at, three, four, fifth round. And I didn't select him because of this concern. You look back, but again, you can't predict injuries. All you can look back is at history, and Riekert Hadding, at least for the past 2 years, hasn't been able to do it. I would rather spend my value on other guys that I can be a little bit more confident on in terms of producing those points for me.
And Rye, like remember last year at the start, we were just trying to kind of waiting for him to score, waiting for
Yeah,
him to get
true.
involved. And I think we're gonna have similar ups and downs with him this year. Ups and downs potentially when he's on the field, like you said. Rye, something interesting for me. I got Vian Conradi and Jed Melvin, two New England Free Jack back rowers outside of my top five. In my honorable mentions, I think Vian Conradi is going to be great. He's going to surprise me and he's going to end up in the top five, I'm sure. A guy that I gotta like the last 5 games of the season and playoffs that Jed Melvin had showed
That's
me
true.
that this guy is going to be a star back rower. Um, and he's just adds another dimension to this New England Free Jacks back row room. Uh, a set of ball carrying, hard tackles, great at the breakdown. He's going to be a force for sure.
Yeah, I think there's just like a salty taste left in my mouth because I think I lost in the quarterfinals last year, and he put up 4.1 for me
Yeah, I could
in
have
that
picked him
one,
up and I didn't.
and it
Um,
was tough. But either
yeah,
way,
and well, right.
yeah.
The last guy I was going to say is just Manuel Ardale. Like,
Mm.
really hard to not name him. The fact that he was in the top five last year. Yes, a lot of discipline issues. Same with Kunatani, but Ardejo finds a way. And he's just like a breakdown monster, and that is going to get you a lot of points week in, week out.
Only guy that I want to add in there is Corey Daniel. We haven't
Yep.
mentioned many DC guys here. If you go on a guy again, we
This
talked
guy
about.
tackles 20 tackles a game.
Yeah, if again, this is all about roster construction, right? If you need a guy, if you have explosive guys, right, at other positions, and you need a guy that's just going to consistently get you points, Corey Daniel, a tackle machine, is going to
Yes,
do that
sir.
for you. Finishes off as the back row seven, and I think he's going to need to be tackling a lot this year with how I feel like DC is going to end
Yeah,
up. I think Corey Daniel might even be one of those sneaky picks that could find himself in the top five based
potentially.
on that tackle production alone.
So,
Last thing here, Matt. Similar question to what I asked you for the front rows. Just guy that you're most confident finishes in your top five, guy that you're most concerned with in
all
your
right.
top
Well,
five, and a guy that can enter your top five that you've left out.
Semi Kunatani for both of those questions. I'm worried about the curse of him being drafted first, and he's going to end up bombing, and I'm also feeling very secure that he's going to do great. No, I think Semi Kunatani feels like a pretty good lock. I think when I look at a guy like Brad Wilkin, just the unknown, I'm going to add Ryan, a guy I put in my honorable mentions that I think is going to end up taking out one of the guys, potentially Brad Wilkin, is going to be Vian Conradi.
Okay. For me, yeah, Semi Kunatani in there for sure. Biggest concern, Sam Tuifua, based on kind of the reasons why you left him out of your top five, and a guy that I can see coming in to my top five is Riekert Hatting. He can, yeah, I can see it. I can
All
see it
right.
finishing like that.
Yeah, maybe
But
if he gets back on the needles.
all right, let's wrap up the show here with an overarching look at our forwards here. We're just going to put the full list up here. This is going to include both front row, second row, back row players. So, Maddie, my top five heading into the 2025 season goes as follows. Semi Kunatani at number one, Frank
Boom.
Lahore at number two,
Whoa. That's messed up, dude.
Jed Holloway at number three,
How does that
Jonah
happen?
Moe at four, and Kellen Galatier at number five.
Yeah, your top five's kind of messed up, buddy.
All right,
It's a bit
let me
too many.
see. Let's hear
Bit
yours.
too many second rows. I got Kunatani first, Jonah Moe second, Dylan Nell third, Jed Holloway fourth. Only one second rower can fit in there because Kellen Galatier is at number five.
I don't
I just don't see it.
I
I
don't
don't.
understand. I don't understand how you can call me whack when it literally happened last year. Frank Lahore finished off as the second best front the forward.
Yeah, that's great. That's one second rower, but you put two of them in there.
Yeah, Jed Holloway can do that too, based on what we want to do.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I guess we'll find out.
I guess we'll find out. But there's your list there. Again, a full breakdown of all of your forward players. Maddie, that was quite fun.
Yeah, that was fun. And just remember, this is the worst it's going to get because we're getting to the backs next week.
We're getting
And
to the
that's our
backs.
bread and butter, specifically nines, specifically tens. This once we move farther from nine, I get worse.
Your favorite former nines giving us your expertise on the positions that we like to shout at but never like to do the work that they did. Anyways, we'll have the full list on our social media pages. Should be a lot of fun as we continue that next week. We get into the backs, scrum half, fly half, center, back three, and your best five backs of the 2025 season. Yeah, Maddie, I think the kind of final thoughts here for me. I think that our rankings, not ours personally, but just the way that fantasy MLR finishes this coming year is going to change drastically based on the depth of teams and based on the busy schedule and the rotation of players. I don't know
For sure.
if we're going to have a back row player that's going to supplant 200 fantasy points again this season.
The
There's a
second time using
possibility
that
it
word.
doesn't. But we'll see. I think that's something that is up for a tandem. And I think those conversations we had earlier about the tandem of Ben Sugars and Ben Strang, there might be more of a split where having both of them gives you top five production numbers, but each one of them alone doesn't kind of reach that ceiling. I think there's a select number of guys that are going to provide that for you. And if you can identify those guys, I think those will be the guys that will be going highest, or at least you should value highest in your upcoming drafts. Maddie, your final thought.
Well, I don't have much. I have a question for the people.
Okay.
For the people, Ryan. Who did we miss?
Who did we
would be
miss?
your top five?
Yeah.
Who are your top five forwards of the year? Who did what dumb thing did Ryan say about a guy? What dumb what dumb player did I put in my top five? Let us know. Put it in the comments. Tell us on Discord. Quote us on Twitter. Tweet at us on Twitter. Tell us we're dumb. And we will respond accordingly.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd love to hear the people's reaction. We love hearing that. Alrighty. Well, hey, again, backs coming up next week in episode 138. You can expect that coming out. Best of luck to Vandy and his apple juice.
Yep. Oh, I've got
computer.
My sources said that he's put the laptop in a bag of rice. We will find out how that works in the coming weeks, so we'll keep you updated.
Follow on socials at the Fantasy Ruckers. Thank you to everyone. Again, sign up to play Fantasy MLR this upcoming season. Link is down below. We hope to see you there. But until next week, for Matt Yee, for Devin Vandy Vanderpool, I'm Ryan Yee. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Fantasy Ruckers Show.
Woo!
You've been listening to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, covering everything rugby from the MLR and beyond. We hope you enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review, and be sure to tell all your friends. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, connect with us on social media at the Fantasy Ruckers. Till next time, this is the Fantasy Ruckers Show, signing off.